Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. I want to give my thoughts and opinions on a recent interview that Phil Spencer has given during the 2015 GeekWire Summit. During this discussion, he was very frank and very honest in regards to his opinion on the Xbox One, in its position in the marketplace, how it's doing against the PlayStation 4, the mistakes Microsoft have made, where they're going to go in the future, and so on and so forth. It's a rather refreshingly honest, actually, discussion between himself and the gamers. And he begins by saying, you know, I don't know, the length of the generation, they Sony have a huge lead and a great product. I love the content, the games lineup that we have, and one thing that I probably didn't realise as much as I should have when I started this was the impact the launch had on our team here in Redmond, the Xbox team. I think he pretty much nails it right on the head there. When the Xbox One was shown off in E3 2013, one just looked at the system with absolute... I think disappointment isn't even the right word. I believe the better word would just be confusion. It was the pricing, the PR fiasco, the fact that it was TV everywhere. But I think the biggest problem was the lack of trust with the people who are going to be buying the damn thing, the customers. And this is something that Phil said. He admitted that he's had discussions with people that, you know, they were polling their fan base, that they were talking with their fan base, and people who literally had Xbox tattooed on their arm then went to people who just fans who just did not trust the Xbox brand, whether it was the always online thing, whether it was the Kinect, and we all know about the whole Kinect spying on you fiasco, even down to little things like not being able to play, or I say little things, is actually quite a big deal, but not being able to play used games. He summed it up by saying they believed in their minds that they were no longer the centre of attention. Microsoft were building a platform for themselves and their development partners, and no longer with the gamers in mind. In other words, gamers were secondary, profit and market share were the primary focus, and it just destroyed the morale of their fan base. And therefore, that's why Sony, along with all of the other reasons that we all know about, for example, the cheaper price point of the PlayStation 4, the fact that their E3 was almost like the anti-Xbox One, and these are not Phil's words, these are mine. Think about it, they did everything they could to demonstrate that they were far away from the Xbox One. They even went and showed how that you can trade a game with your, friend, and literally just handing over a disc. And I think that whether Sony or not actually were intending to go the Microsoft route, and there were some rumours that they were, when they saw just what happened at the E3 conference with Microsoft, it just cemented in their mind that they went the right damn way. Phil did say that he believes the team is making, and I quote, amazing progress. We didn't know backwards compatibility would work. We started it, a few ninja engineers went off and figured out how you could go from PowerPC to x86 and translate games code that's about as time critical as any piece of code you could want in terms of its performance, and they got it done. So I would never question the ability of organization, but I'll say that we're no longer motivated by beating Sony, we're motivated by gaining as many customers as we can, end quote. I think that's actually a very pertinent and very, maybe not pertinent, but I would say that that's probably about the best way that Phil can go about this, that Microsoft can go about this. They've got some really good IPs, and you know my opinion on that, they do, honestly. I think their games lineup is really strong. The actual system itself is fun. I like the UI. I think it could use a bit of streamlining, but the PlayStation 4's is not perfect either. The controller is really nice. It's a definite improvement over the Xbox 360s. The infrastructure, the online infrastructure is really great, to be honest with you. They've got an excellent team of engineers and games developers behind them. They've got a great lineup of IPs. Their core fundamentals of the system were there, but the pricing was a real problem, and the messages around launch definitely hurt them. and the lack of exclusives on both systems is not doing either of them any favours. This is being somewhat remedied, of course, by Tomb Raider, which is coming out in the next, when is it coming out? I'm trying to remember the exact date. That's it, 10th of November according to their official website. I knew it was early November, I just couldn't remember the exact date. Anyway, so you've got that, you've got Halo. All these great games are coming out on both systems. It's going to be a very strong launch. And despite the fact that the PlayStation 4 is ahead in terms of sales, it's not like the Xbox One is doing badly. According to some people, if you listen to them, the Xbox One's selling like 3 consoles, and yes, the system is doing pretty abysmally in Japan, despite the fact that it has had numerous price cuts. In fact, it's just gone down, I believe, 5,000 yen, which is quite significant, but it doesn't really make that much difference. The system's not going to outsell the PlayStation 4 in that region just for numerous reasons, really. But with all of that said, I do feel that the performance of the Xbox One in terms of hardware is probably not helped either. But let's just be honest here. I mean, there are some reports that the Star Wars Battlefront is going to be running at 720p on the Xbox One, 900p on the PlayStation 4. And this is probably going to annoy some people when I say this, but come on now. Even if you're running at 900p at this point, it's 2015. After you've listened to this video, go ahead and go to Amazon or what have you, it doesn't really make a difference, and look at basic 4K televisions. Now, admittedly, basic 4K television entry level, they're not perfect, they've not got the best colour reproduction, they might have low refresh rates and all that stuff, but in a year, those entry model TVs, monitors are going to become really cheap, and you can certainly get pretty cheap, decent screens at the moment which are 4K. My point being that PCs in their GPU side of things aren't quite where you'd expect either. You can definitely play 4K with PC, but you're not going to be able to do it at, for example, 120 frames per second. However, there are a lot of GPUs which can definitely push 4K at 30 FPS or 60 FPS, particularly if you're going crossfire, and it doesn't cost you that much. In a year's time, however, when the next generation GPUs, 4K is going to be pretty standard. However, when it comes to 1440p, let alone 1080p, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I feel personally that both generations, both the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, are further behind where they were versus the Xbox 360 or PS3 at the time of their launch in comparison to a PC. What I mean by that is if you're doing this in a pure G-flop, T-flop type of way, and admittedly you can't always do that because you've got other aspects of the system to take into account, for example the amount of memory it's got, the performance of its CPU and various other bits and bobs, but if you were to take a very harsh, blunt look at this, when the Xbox 360 and PS3 were first released, Xbox 360, just for your point of reference, was released pretty much 10 years ago now. So 2005, at that point, the NVIDIA GeForce 7800 was released, and indeed the same architecture was actually powering the PS3. And then a little bit after that, the GeForce 8800 came out. It was more powerful, but then the GPU just absolutely rocketed up in terms of performance, and now if you were to look at the NVIDIA Titan or the equivalent, that would be like the R9 290, and this is, by the way, not even the highest end GPUs. These are GPUs that were released in, let's say, 2013-ish. They have 3 times the maximum floating point performance of the PS4. Now you might say to yourself, well, why am I bringing this up? Why power in this particular video? Because in my opinion, just judging from the comments that Phil's made in this interview and other interviews, and even Shuhei himself, I think it's fairly obvious that this generation of consoles is not going to last as long as those. I mean, let's just be honest, on a very brutal, harsh way, the Xbox 360, yes, it's pulling out its own teeth at this point, it's 10 years old, but it lasted for absolutely ages, and I do think there are multiple reasons behind that. I don't think it was just, you know, oh hey, there was nothing else better, because yes, there were much better GPUs they could have used. There were other SoCs they could have gone with, system on chips. There were other GPUs that were very power efficient. They could have possibly gone another power PC route, or they could have gone x86. My point being that they could have released a system before that quite easily. There would have been as powerful, considerably more powerful than the Xbox 360 or PS3. One of the main reasons I feel they didn't do it was because at that point there was a financial crisis, and people just didn't really want to do it. It was another reason that even the PC had a bit of a sales slump, because people just couldn't afford a $400 or $500 graphics card. I'm not saying that's the only reason they didn't do it. I feel that the arrival of the GCN architecture with compute, and the fact that of course you've got the AMD Jaguar processor in there, it did help quite a bit. But at the end of the day, there is a finite level of performance that these systems have, and with virtual reality now becoming a big thing, let's face it, Sony are pushing on, banging on, and even Shuhei Yoshida himself has said, and this is not a verbatim quote, but he did say that at the moment it's a very interim kind of entry level of virtual reality. It is. It's like the original PS1 in terms of how basic it is compared to what it's going to be like in 5-10 years time. And it's just the fact that the PlayStation 4, in terms of actual raw GPU power, we've learned of course that it doesn't have an additional GPU in PlayStation VR. Therefore, yes, it can upscale the frame rate using various methodologies, and it does work to a degree, upscaling from 60 to 120 frames per second, but at the end of the day, if you were to look at what systems can manage to push out at 60 frames per second at 1080p, which is roughly what they need to aim for, well, actually minimum they need to aim for, it's a hell of a lot of performance, and the graphics are going to have to suffer for this generation of virtual reality. Now, I'm not saying this in a negative way. I do love the PlayStation 4, I love the Xbox One. I think they're both really excellent machines, I do. I think they're going to have an excellent set of games released over the next couple of years, but I think a lot of this will also depend on what direction Nintendo go. For example, Nintendo actually are in a very good position, assuming they don't go their usual gimmicky route, which I think would be a major mistake. I don't think they shouldn't go with gimmicks, because that does help them, but I think they should at least have quite a good level of performance. And honestly, you could probably develop a decent system. Nintendo could probably release a decent system with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5, let's say 2.4, 2.6 T-flop of performance, and they could also have AMD's next generation of APUs quite easily, might I add. And they could do that at a fairly good price point, roughly what the PS4 launched for. Obviously, it does depend on what other peripherals they go with at the time and when they do end up launching, but let's say they end up launching, let's say, early 2017, possibly late 2016, in which case with the die shrinks that we're seeing, it could definitely be possible. And the other problem with this generation of consoles is it's actually kind of easy to get the maximum level of performance out of it. I'm not saying it's completely, totally easy, it's not, but it's a lot easier than, let's say, the PS3 with the cell architecture, which was an absolute pain in the buttocks. Everyone knows that. Xbox 360 wasn't quite as bad, but the PS3 with the cell processor was really difficult, particularly because, of course, with the segregated memory they also were running with it. With the PS4 and Xbox One, with the Xbox One you've got ESRAM as well as asynchronous shaders and other bits and pieces, and DirectX 12 that's incoming. With the PlayStation 4 primarily it's compute, and with both of them you have to be a little careful with, let's say, your caches, that type of stuff, because otherwise you can run into quite a few cycles of, let's say, on the memory side of things, Naughty Dog didn't realise. As you know, it's got two sets of modules on the CPU. It's got, let's call them modules A and B, because each module contains 4 cores or 4 processor cores. So if you're accessing the other one's level 2 cache, so let's say module A is accessing the module B's level 2 cache, it's almost as slow as the accessing the GDDR5 memory in terms of the number of cycles. I think it's 190 versus 220 or something like that for memory. quite literally. So yeah, there are those little nuances that they are learning. Of course, they're still learning things such as developmental tools, ESRAM's improving, and they have done other things such as improvements to the graphics drivers. They've admitted that, and as I said, they're probably going to have some other system tweaks, maybe free up the resources. There are certain ways that they're definitely going to improve things, but at the end of the day, the systems are kind of simple in comparison to, let's say, the PS3's cell. But getting back to the main topic, because I've kind of gone round the bush here, I think that Phil is 100% right. I don't necessarily believe that they can't catch up with Sony. I think it's possible. Let's face it, if you told me that the PS3 would be roughly on equal ground, well, at the end of the day, it was pretty much equal if you were to compare it to what it was when it was first launched, both systems. No one thought the PS3 was going to be able to catch up. In fact, at some points we thought that Sony were going to basically go bankrupt. There were multiple reasons behind that. I mean, the cells cost a ridiculous amount of money, so they couldn't cost reduce too much. Microsoft were being very aggressive with its exclusive content. You had a ridiculous launch lead, I guess you could say, because the Xbox 360 was on sale for so much longer than the PlayStation 3. All of this stuff just meant that the PS3 was just behind, and even Shuhei Yoshida admitted that their support for the system in terms of actually helping developers, helping the programmers themselves use the system, use the PS3 cell, it sucked. It sucked balls. They made so many mistakes with the cell, and this is why they fixed a lot of these problems with the PlayStation 3. With the PlayStation 4, they did. They got really good SDKs ready for launch. They had a simple, easy to understand memory architecture, GPU and CPU, so developers basically were ready to go. But main point, can Phil and the Xbox team catch up? Potentially yes, potentially no. It of course will highly depend on the next couple of years, what exclusives both companies manage to push out, how virtual reality adopts, which of them has a better solution, various other bits and pieces in regards to that. However, I feel personally that this generation of systems is probably going to be fairly short. I wouldn't be surprised if by 2017 at the latest we start hearing rumours of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox whatever the hell, because it would just make sense. Now, I don't know the future of those systems, whether they're going to have drives, whether they're going to be only online, whether they're going to be sold as a service, whether it's going to be kind of a half cloud, half console, by which I mean it's basically an extension of what Microsoft have done with the Xbox One. So it would, in a way, be always online, because you would need the cloud to be able to help render and offload the workload. Whether that's going to be a thing, I don't know. I'm hoping not, because at that point you should have memory technologies which are fairly cheap, well, power reduced and fairly cheap to implement by then. Like HBM2 should be quite cheap to do, and obviously with HBM2 you don't have the memory limitations of HBM1, so you could easily go like 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM. 16 gigabytes of RAM, HBM2 with, let's say, a 4 to 6 flop GPU shouldn't really be too bad in 2017-18 to produce, because you're going to have SOCs, and they could potentially go with an AMD Zen derivative, assuming it is AMD that are going to be providing the chips, but just for this video I'll make the assumption that they are. Obviously I'm throwing out stuff not particularly well researched in terms of the future technology. I'm just giving examples. I do feel that this generation is not going to last until 2013, just for the sake, 2013, that would be pretty impressive, 2020, 2023, something like that. I just don't think it's going to last that long. Anyway, give me your thoughts and opinions on this. Do you think that the Xbox can catch up to the PlayStation 4? I don't know. I think that they've got a good chance, but really it depends on how long the generation is going to go on for. But I don't think, regardless, that this generation is going to last quite as long. I do think that we're going to get some kick-ass games. I do. I think that this generation is going to have some really excellent games. I think, for example, Uncharted 4, absolutely amazing. I've been playing the collection, and geez, I forgot how much I enjoy Uncharted, to be honest. Really looking forward to the new Halo, Tomb Raider. All those games are going to be fantastic, and I think this is going to be an excellent generation. I don't think it's going to be a bad generation. I just don't think it's going to be as long as the previous generation, or maybe even the PS2. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.